Hi, this is the end of January already. Can you believe how time passes so quickly? I'm going to introduce a new project today. It's called Valentine Surprise. It's something that I designed last year. I wanted to make a quilt for my niece, but I wanted to make it into blocks. I didn't want to just have one big project because I wanted to be able to travel with this and take my project along when I went to visit my daughter. When she was at work, it would give me something to do. Or when I go to one of my bees, that I'd have a project lined out to work on for the year. This is going to be a free gift to you if you order anything $25 or more during the month of February 2018. And we'll show you how to build it today on this video. My niece enjoys purple, and so I made her a twin size bed with 12 purple blocks and then sashing between the blocks. I have a few snapshots here to show you. And I wasn't sure how to handle so much purple. I wanted to warm it up. I saw this photograph in a children's book and I thought, aha, those are great colors to put with my purple blocks. So I built the individual blocks, and then on a vacation to the beach, I set up my little featherweight sewing machine and used my 1/4-inch foot to stitch around all the blocks. So this is the stitching because I intended to top stitch all these individual blocks before I put the sashing on. And then after I put the sashing, I took it to a long arm machine quilter and she finished it for me. Anyway, this is what the finished quilt looks like. And then this was a photograph of the quilt on her bed. So this block, Valentine Surprise, is going to finish off at approximately 16 inches square. And I used freezer paper from the grocery store. I just tore off a piece and it comes off the roll. It's all wrinkled up. Now these patterns will lie flat after you've pressed them, but I like, instead of just rolling it backwards, I like rolling it in the opposite direction of the roll. I just roll it up and it just helps it to flatten out a little bit. And then I take it to the iron and just lightly iron the top just to lay it flatter. You don't even have to, but now then you use your blue tape to tape the pattern down. And then you start numbering everything exactly the way it is on the pattern that you will receive. The pattern will already be numbered, and because it's a square, it's easy to get these things turned around, the pattern pieces turned around. So if you number it exactly in the same orientation, that will help. And it's very important to take a pen, a marker with a different color, and put registration marks. Just be real generous with these marks. It's like darts in dressmaking. It will help you position things later on. But also, very important are these center points. They all come together in the middle. And if you take a marker with still another color and put arrows all to the middle, because it's very easy to turn these pieces in an opposite direction, and they'll fit together so much better if you mark an arrow pointing to the center. Then you'll know exactly where those pieces are supposed to be positioned. These arrows will especially come in be helpful if you decide you wanted to do some of these pieces with a stripy fabric, so that you know exactly that you need to put that arrow, position it on a stripe, and then they'll all come together very nicely. What I did for this project, because I want to travel with this again, be prepared to go. So I'm planning to make a queen size quilt with 25 of these blocks, but I don't want the blocks all to be the same. But if you think there'll be 5 blocks and 5 rows. That's our 25. I just went ahead and selected some fabric that I'm going to use for 5 of my blocks. I don't want all the blocks, like I said, to be the same, but I'm going to do 5 of this particular combination. And I don't have to make these all the same because it's so easy, the number of combinations that you can make just from this variety of fabric. And then I use some gallon-sized bags and put that combination together so it's ready to go in my bag. And for the green stripes or the green corners, I put all my greens in a variety of background colors, all a variety of creams together. So that will be the same throughout all of the blocks. So I put that in a bigger bag, a 2-gallon bag. Those creams will go in there. And then I have a little bag for my French fuse pieces, because we need French fuse for the foundation of each of these blocks. Just cut it approximately 17 inches square. And then I have these nice market baskets. I love these market baskets. And so in the market basket, I will put my fabric, and I have my tools, my rotary cutter and my glue stick. I have my sealing iron in a little sack, because if I have to pack up quickly and it's still hot, this will be a safe place to keep it. I have my baby wipes and my iron stand. I'm going to put all my fabric in there, my tools, and okay, I want to be ready to go. And sometimes when I'm working and you have to leave suddenly, you can take your paper, your working drawing up, and just roll everything together. But I find it's convenient to just put my working drawing on a piece of sturdy cardboard, a piece of masonite, thin piece of plywood if you have it. So there's my working drawing that you can use all 25 times, and your freezer paper you can use at least up to 4 times each. So I keep my pattern pieces in an envelope. You know, when I'm finished with them, I take them off as I'm building my quilt, and then put them in a safe place to keep them for next time. And by putting my working drawing on this piece of cardboard and attaching my little cutting board up there with or attach a cutting board to the top, it kind of protects it a little bit. Okay, after cutting out our pattern pieces from the freezer paper will iron to the fabric. We iron our pieces at least a ½ inch around, because with my magic button, we're going to add a 1/4 inch seam allowance to every pattern piece. So you can use your opposite hand to steer. So there's the magic button. You roll it right along the edge of the freezer paper. We're cutting with the magic button, rolling right along the edge of the freezer paper. And these little hearts have the little dip in the top of the heart. So I didn't want to cut into my fabric. You could get this more carefully, but I'm just going to use a scissors because I didn't want to cut into the fabric. So just roll these out. The same way with these little things, I can go in so far, and then I'm going to stop and turn, and I'll finish that cut with my scissors. So we have these little pieces to cut, and just use your opposite hand to steer. You can just roll right along there. We've taped our working drawing to the tabletop. The next step is to put your French fuse down, and you put the textured side up. That's the fusible side. So you lay that over the drawing, and then we're going to use more blue tape to tape it in several places. Okay, this particular block is not necessarily a traditional quilt block. Usually a traditional quilt block has a lot of straight lines. This has some curved lines. I put some curves and some hearts in here. So with these curvy shapes, with the straight pieces, this is a good technique, or a good technique to use for this particular block. But I recommend on most traditional blocks with straight lines that you should just go ahead and do the traditional method. But if you have something like this, this has 38 pieces, just individual pieces, and you'll see how fast we'll be able to build this quilt top, and then we will top stitch all the pieces down. So we have cut out all of our pieces, every piece with the magic button, and then I go ahead and place these close to where we're going to build. We're going to build from the outside in, so I'm going to put these background pieces down first, close to where I'm planning to use them. All right, now that we've placed some of these, the beige pieces that we're using in the background, I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and start sealing these down so you see where they are. So by placing this very carefully, you see we have 2 outside perimeter lines plus the 1/4 of an inch beyond that. So we're going to line up those lines, and you can turn back the seam allowance just to find out the correct placement. You can also see where this curved line comes around and where that point is. So you can see that we have to move this over a bit. So you want to be careful in your placement. Just take your time till you get this started. This is important. I think that looks pretty good now. And then all you do, you leave the seam allowances out, exposed like that, and you seal everything down with your sealing iron. I like to go around the seam allowances with the pointy end of the sealing iron and just get it all down. It just feels like it's being tacked down. All right, so now we're ready to place this one, and we can skip around. And so this piece, number 5, is just going to go down here. Take time with your placement. Nothing needs to be turned here because nothing is touching this. We don't turn anything until we're going to have a piece that touches. So we seal that down. We build from the background to the foreground. Now this one, number 6, look at this. It's going to touch just here and here. So I'm going to have to turn just that edge and that edge. And I have a fresh glue stick, a baby white in my shot glass. That helps keep the glue stick from drying out. And I just, in an outward motion, this is the first gluing, just to turn that edge back. And you follow the paper. Okay, finger press. And now the second gluing will hold these pieces together because there's no French fuse right there. The glue stick holds the seam allowances together. So we're just going to place that, lining it up with our registration marks. That looks pretty good. And then we seal it down. We only turn those 2 edges. Now we're going to keep proceeding around the block. Line everything up. Sight your lines. Fold that back. This looks good. Seal it down. And then this one is touching here, so we have to turn just this one edge. And I like to use a gluing mat that I can take to the sink and wash off if it gets too sticky. Turn that back to match the paper. Finger press. Second gluing for the seam allowances. Lining it up with those registration marks and the perimeter edge here. Place everything carefully. This actually looks like it needs to be scooted over a little bit. There's a little fudge factor in our seam allowance, so just try to get those lines going in the way you want them to go. There we go, that looks better. Now we're going to do the corner green pieces. So we just place those close to where they're going to go. Here's number 8, number 1, there's 11 and 4. So this piece is just going to touch on these 2 long edges right there. So that's all we have to turn back. I usually turn just one edge at a time so your fingers don't get all sticky. Finger press. Then I'll turn the second side over here. An outward motion first so you don't shuffle the pattern off of your fabric. You want the iron to be hot enough to hold these freezer paper pieces onto the fabric. If they come loose, just go press it down. I usually use a cotton setting to put the freezer pattern pieces onto the fabric. So then I glue both of the turned back sides at the same time. And then we just line this up. Looks like I didn't put that many registration marks here. I should have put more registration marks down, but we're just going to line this up on the edge and seal it down. I like to put the green on. You could have put the green corners down first. That might have helped with your positioning a little better. But I like the idea of the green being on top of the background. But when it's sewn, it really doesn't show that much. Right now that we have all of our background pieces done, we're ready to start building this kind of a flower shape. So I, again, just put these pieces close to where they're going to be. We have the green corners on the diagonal, and I actually used 2 different greens here too. I'm going to mix up all my greens as well as some of the background colors, but I'm going to make 5 blocks that are essentially the same in the background, but then I'm going to use different colors for the inside of the flower. And if you just put these close to where you're going to use them, you won't get so confused. Now let me show you how fast and easy it is to do these curved pieces. So here we have one of our first heart-shaped pieces, and I wanted to tell you that I'm using a contrasting green, a darker green with some leaves on it and yellow that are going to be just with the heart-shaped pieces. So when I put this quilt together, it's going to form like a nice chain of hearts going through the quilt. So that's my contrasting piece to all the different yellow greens that I'm planning to use in this project. So now with these hearts, we're just going to cut right into the, not into the paper, but into the little crevice here. And then we don't have to cut anything else because it will turn. But before we turn that edge, you're going to hold the piece up to where it's going to go in our project. And we're going to make little clips here. See, we only have to turn what is touching. That'll be the outside part of this heart. But that right here, we need to leave this out so other pieces will go on top. So I'm going to try to position this and then just make a little clip into those areas because I want to leave that out. I'm only going to turn the top of the arches here. So now I use my glue stick in an outward motion again. See, there's my little clip. To make that show up easier, I like to make a little notch instead of just a clip. It's hard for me to see those little, so I just made a little notch there and a little notch over here. Now I can see where I stop turning. So I have a couple little notches. So now I'm going to glue in an outward motion again. And I'm going to glue just one side of this top of the heart at a time. I'm going to use my fingers just to get into that crevice there, and just use my fingers and pinch right along the edge of the paper. Just make little tiny pinches. Right to that clip. And then I'm going to finger press. And I'm going to look on the back. That looks pretty darn good. And now we'll glue the second half of that heart to the notch. And just pinch again. You can use 2 fingers. I use a 2-finger pinch often and just work myself to the edge, from both sides. Just make little tiny pinches, just like that, and then finger press. And if we had to manipulate those little tucks, you can easily do that while your glue stick is still slippery. Then you could manipulate those little tucks if you have to. But I think that looks pretty good. Now we're ready for the second gluing on those pieces. Using your registration marks. You can see how important those registration marks are. And this looks good here. This, we could actually turn that back a little bit so that little piece doesn't show there. I'm gonna just pick that up and make another little clip just right there and turn back that little bit. We don't want any raw edges to show, so always place it and double check before you leave it there. I might even do that too for this side. Doesn't take much, just a tiny bit. Okay, now we're gonna glue it and place it. I think that looks pretty good. Now, when we're gluing some of these pieces, as I said, the seam allowance gives you a little fudge factor. And so if you get off on your drawing just a little bit, sometimes you may be gluing on top of another pattern piece. Well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to have to pick paper out of this later on. So your sewer stiletto, you can just pick that up and pull that out. Just lift it. You don't have to remove it because we want it for that placement. But just by lifting it out of there, we're not going to have to pick paper out of the seam allowances later on. So seal that down. And now we're going to continue building all around. All right, now we've got the first round of the orange placed. And here we have Rachel.
Hi, everybody.
Rachel's going to help placing this second round of oranges. She's going to tell you a little bit about it, but you could grab a friend and work together on this project because it is a great project. You can work on either side of the table together and you'll see how fast this goes together. I have a little 2-hour bee that I go to, and if I go with all my pattern pieces cut out, I can actually build this block myself in a 2-hour time period. So now Rachel's going to tell you about the next pieces.
Hi, everybody. So the next pieces are going to be these little squares, and you want to make sure as you're placing them, just like we were doing before, that you're lining them up, the numbers matching, but also because some of these are almost more of like a diagonal versus some are like a square, just make sure that you're using the right piece so that your registration marks will line up with the next set of diamonds that go down. So for this piece, say 25, to line it up next to where it's going to go, look and see where it's touching. It's only touching on these two sides because it's touching number 16. So these will be the two sides we need to turn. We can leave this side and this side because they'll be covered by 32 and 33. So then it's the same process as before, where you take it and turn it over. I just want to make sure I'm tracking the correct side. So I'm going to do this one first. Glue in an outward motion. And then finger press the paper facing you. Make that straight edge. And then I'm just going to take it back and check again. So I'm going to turn this side. Glue in an outward motion, finger press. And then with these, so with the straight edges, we're going to get to this point where we've got a corner here. Let me just press it down all the way. So we've got a corner, so I just want to make sure that no dog ears are hanging out. So what I'll do is I will just clip it. Make sure nothing sticks out. Okay, and then we'll take it back to where it goes. Line it up, and then we'll do our second gluing. Glue. You can lift up your edges, check and make sure it's in the right spot. And then seal down with your sealing iron and keep going for all of your red squares.
Now we're ready for our next row. And remember, you marked the center, the direction of these pieces because they are so easy. They look the same, but they're not quite the same. So you want to make sure that you've drawn your arrows before you cut your paper pattern pieces apart, and make sure that all of those arrows are pointing towards the center. So we're going to do that first and double check, because when you're busy talking with your friends, it's so easy to put these together wrong. You know, this was a pattern that I drew myself, so it's not just perfectly symmetrical. So it's very important that those arrows will tell you which direction to put these down. All right, now I'm ready to put number 37 down. So it's only touching here and here. That's the only place you turn for this first piece, and then we're going to work continuously around the circle. So we're going to use our glue stick and just glue those two bottom pieces one edge at a time so your fingers don't get all sticky. And we often form a dog ear on these pointy ends. You don't want to force all that under. You see that big dog ear? You follow the paper and just run it out all the way to the edge, forming that big dog ear. And so you finger press, and then you can just pull that piece back just a little bit. You see the folded edge on top. Your scissors gets a little gluey. Sometimes you could take a wet paper towel or baby wipe and wipe that off. So now we have a nice point, and we're going to do our second gluing. See, that's going to fit in there nicely. We just do our second gluing now. We put that in there nicely. Make it go toward the center. Seal it down. You seal each piece as you fit the final placement. You just build one piece at a time. Now number 36, this piece, it's going to touch 3 places. It's going to touch these 2 sides and here. Sometimes this board gets a little sticky. I just go ahead and use my sewer stiletto to help pick it up. And then place it right in here. There we go. And seal it down. Now I'm continuing to look for places that I might have glued paper under there, and I don't want to do that. I want to save my pattern so I can use it again. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove this piece. And quilters like to see their pattern or their design, their fabric. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove some of these pieces, and I'll be saving them because I can use them again. I can remove any paper that is completely surrounded. We want to leave these pieces on because they're your placement for the next pieces. But it's fun to go ahead and take a break sometime, carefully removing your pieces. And sometimes I go ahead and use the sealing iron to help lift this up. Make sure this is all sealed down. But it's fun to do that. I'm going to go ahead and remove this green piece. And seal it down. And so I have to leave those because that's the position for the next piece. But this one certainly can come off. And this one. When I'm finished building this whole block, I take it to the ironing board and use my big iron to seal it all down. So that's good. For now, you get a little peek at our colors we're using. Like I said, I'm going to make 5 blocks that are similar, but I'm going to use the same fabric, but mix it up so the blocks don't all look the same. I'm hoping to end up with 25 blocks that all are similar but a little different. So now we're down to our very last piece. Okay, and we're going to put that down. All these arrows come together now. And we're going to seal it down, and Rachel's going to help me remove the paper. And then we have one more piece that we're going to put in the center of all those points.
If you weren't reusing your pattern pieces, you could throw them away. But like Ann said earlier, you can use them up to 4 times, which is really helpful when you're making a quilt where you are using the same block over and over again. There's that last piece. And sometimes as you're taking off the freezer paper, pieces will come loose, so all you need to do is just re-glue them. And then from here, we'll take it to the to our big iron and just make sure that every piece is connected to the to the French views.
All right, our points came together pretty well, but if they don't worry. We have a little trick. We're putting like a little button on in the center of each block, and I get these little stickers from an office supply store, and this is one time where I'm gonna put this on the wrong side of the fabric. It's self-sticking, and then you can go with my magic button, or you can just cut out a small circle, leaving approximately 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just too lazy to get up and go get my magic button right now. So it's faster to do it actually with the rotary cutter. So we're just cutting that out. And this is one situation where I'm leaving the paper inside the quilt. This gives me a nice firm edge to cut this. So I'm really slathering that with glue. And then I use my little pinching motion to make a circle. Rachel does this a different way. She goes ahead and cuts the edge, but I'm always afraid I'm going to cut clips into the... I'm always afraid I'm going to cut the fabric. I don't want anything to fray out. So there's different ways of doing this. But I do it this way. Just pinching it back. And then I turn it over to look at it. And it's pretty nice and round. If it's not, you can take your sewer stiletto and just manipulate these little tucks. While the glue is still slippery, you can just kind of manipulate the tucks to take out any place it might be a little awkward. But you can just manipulate that while the glue is still wet. And then I put a lot of glue on that turn back edge. And then this gives us a finish to our quilt. Just kind of position that in the middle. And there we are. That's our quilt. It was very fast for us to do. This would be a good project for you to work on in community. You could grab a bunch of friends and make this block. And we're not going to be sharing this every week. We will, at the end, when we have a bunch of blocks done, we'll show you different ways of handling this. We hope you enjoy our Valentine surprise. Thank you very much for watching.